The rain hammered against the windows of the small townhouse in Cheapside, matching the rhythm of Eleanor Hartley's anxious heartbeat. She sat at the worn wooden table, staring at the stack of unpaid bills that had accumulated since her husband's death 6 months prior. Thomas had left her nothing but debts and bitter memories, memories of harsh words, controlling hands, and a love that had curdled into something dark and suffocating. A sharp knock at the door made her jump. Eleanor rose slowly, smoothing her black morning dress with trembling fingers. She wasn't expecting visitors, and creditors typically sent letters before appearing in person. The man standing on her doorstep was not a creditor. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in an impeccably tailored coat that spoke of wealth beyond her comprehension. His dark hair was swept back from a face that might have been handsome, if not for the severity etched into every line. Cold, grey eyes assessed her with an intensity that made her want to step back. "Mrs. Hartley." His voice was deep and measured, carrying the refined accent of the aristocracy. "Yes," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am Alexander Rothwell, Duke of Ashford. May I come in? We have matters to discuss regarding your late husband's debts." Eleanor's stomach dropped. She had heard of the Duke of Ashford. Everyone in London had. He was known for his vast holdings, his political influence, and his reputation for crushing anyone who stood in his way. What business could he possibly have with a poor widow? She stepped aside, allowing him to enter. He seemed to fill the small parlour with his presence, making the modest furniture appear even shabbier by comparison. The Duke remained standing, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on her again. "Your husband owed me a considerable sum," he stated without preamble. £10,000. To be precise, he borrowed it to invest in a shipping venture that failed spectacularly. £10,000. The sum was astronomical. Eleanor felt the room tilt slightly. She gripped the back of a chair for support. "I have no way to repay such an amount, Your Grace. Everything Thomas left behind barely covers a fraction of his other debts." "I am aware." The Duke's expression remained impassive, "which is why I have come with a proposal." Eleanor's pulse quickened with fear. She had heard stories of what happened to debtors, prison, servitude, worse. She thought of her husband's controlling nature, how he had dictated her every move, and felt panic rising in her chest. "I require a companion for my niece, Catherine," the Duke continued, seemingly oblivious to her distress. "She is 10 years old and has been in my care since my sister's death last year. Catherine needs guidance, education, and a gentle presence. Her previous governesses have found her challenging." "You want me to be a governess?" Eleanor asked, confused. "More than that, a companion, a guardian figure, someone who can help her navigate her grief and emerge as a capable young woman. In exchange, your debt will be forgiven, and you will receive room, board, and a generous salary." It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. Eleanor had learned through painful experience that men always wanted something more than they stated. "Why me, Your Grace? Surely there are more qualified women. You have experienced loss and survived it," he interrupted. "Catherine needs someone who understands pain, not someone who will simply teach her piano and French. You are a widow of good family who has fallen on hard times through no fault of your own. That makes you suitable." Eleanor studied his face, searching for some hint of ulterior motive, but his expression revealed nothing. She thought of the alternative, debtor's prison or worse, being forced onto the streets. At least in the Duke's household, she would have safety and shelter. "When would I begin?" she asked quietly. "Tomorrow. I will send a carriage for you at noon." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Mrs. Hartley, I expect absolute discretion and dedication. In return, you will be treated with respect. Do not give me cause to regret this arrangement." The warning in his voice was clear, and it sent a chill down her spine that reminded her too much of Thomas. As the Duke departed, Eleanor sank into the chair, wondering if she had just traded one prison for another. The Duke's carriage arrived precisely at noon, far more luxurious than any vehicle Eleanor had ever ridden in. As they travelled through London toward Mayfair, she watched the streets transform from cramped and dirty to wide and elegant. Ashford House stood on Grosvenor Square, a magnificent Georgian mansion that spoke of centuries of wealth and power. A stern-faced housekeeper named Mrs. Blackwood greeted her at the entrance and led her through marble halls adorned with priceless paintings and gilded mirrors. Eleanor felt increasingly small and out of place with each step. "Your rooms are in the East Wing, adjacent to Miss Catherine's," Mrs. Blackwood explained in clipped tones. "The Duke expects punctuality at meals and absolute propriety at all times. He values his privacy and his routine. Do not disturb him unnecessarily." The chambers assigned to Eleanor were more beautiful than anywhere she had ever lived. A four-poster bed dominated the room, dressed in cream and blue linens. Large windows overlooked the gardens, and a writing desk sat ready with fresh paper and ink. It felt like a dream, yet the anxiety in her chest wouldn't ease. "Miss Catherine is in the schoolroom," Mrs. Blackwood continued. "The Duke wishes you to meet her now." They climbed a flight of stairs to a bright room filled with books, maps, and abandoned toys. A small girl with auburn curls sat at the window, her back to them. She didn't turn when they entered. "Miss Catherine, this is Mrs. Hartley, your new companion," Mrs. Blackwood announced. Silence. The child remained motionless, staring out the window. Mrs. Blackwood's lips thinned. "Miss Catherine, it is rude to ignore your elders." "It's quite all right," Eleanor said softly. She approached slowly and sat in a chair near the window, not too close. "Catherine, I'm Eleanor. I know you probably don't want another stranger in your home, especially one who's supposed to look after you." But the girl's shoulders stiffened slightly, the first acknowledgement that she was listening. "I lost someone too," Eleanor continued gently. "My husband died 6 months ago. Some days I don't want to talk to anyone either. I just want to sit and remember, or sometimes try very hard to forget." Catherine turned her head slightly, revealing red-rimmed eyes in a pale, freckled face. "Did you love him?" the girl asked, her voice barely audible. Eleanor considered lying, then decided against it. "No, not at the end, but I loved who I thought he was when we married. That's a different kind of loss, I suppose." "I loved my mama," Catherine whispered. "She got sick and then she was gone. Uncle Alexander brought me here, but everything is wrong. He doesn't smile. He doesn't know what to do with me." "Perhaps we're all a bit lost right now," Eleanor suggested. "Your uncle, you, me. Maybe we can figure it out together." For the first time, Catherine looked directly at her. The girl's green eyes, so much like her uncle's might have been before life hardened them, studied Eleanor with surprising intensity. "The other governesses tried to make me forget her. They said I needed to move forward, be proper, stop crying." "That's foolish," Eleanor said firmly. "Your mother deserves to be remembered. Grief isn't something you discard like old clothes. It's something you learn to carry." A ghost of a smile touched Catherine's lips. "Mrs. Hartley, would you like to see my mamma's portrait? I keep it hidden because Uncle Alexander looks sad when he sees it." "I would be honored." 3 weeks passed in a rhythm that Eleanor gradually grew accustomed to. Her days were spent with Catherine, reading together, walking in the gardens, and slowly coaxing the girl back toward life. Catherine was bright and curious when she felt safe, and Eleanor found herself genuinely caring for the child. The Duke, however, remained an enigma. He appeared at breakfast and dinner, impeccably dressed and unfailingly polite, but distant. He asked after Catherine's progress in clipped tones, nodded at Eleanor's reports, and returned to his study or departed for Parliament. His presence filled any room he entered, and Eleanor found herself tensing whenever he was near, old instincts from her marriage making her wary of powerful men. One evening, as Eleanor was helping Catherine prepare for bed, a servant appeared with an urgent message. The Duke requested Eleanor's presence in his study immediately. Her heart raced as she descended the stairs. What had she done wrong? Was he displeased with her work? The familiar fear of male displeasure made her hands shake as she knocked on the heavy oak door. Enter. The study was dimly lit by firelight and a single lamp on the massive desk. The Duke stood by the window, his back to her, hands clasped behind him. The tension in his shoulders was visible even in the shadows. "You wish to see me, Your Grace." Eleanor kept her voice steady. "Catherine laughed today." He spoke without turning. "I heard her in the garden with you. I cannot remember the last time I heard her laugh." Eleanor waited, unsure how to respond. "Her previous governesses sent me formal reports of her deficiencies, her stubbornness, her tears, her refusal to apply herself to lessons. Your reports are different. You write of her progress in understanding Greek mythology, her interest in botany, her kindness to the scullery maid's daughter." Finally, he turned to face her. "Why?" "Because those are the things that matter," Eleanor said quietly. "Catherine is grieving and lost. Forcing Latin declensions and perfect curtsies onto her won't heal that wound. Letting her be a child, letting her feel and grow, that might." The Duke moved closer, and Eleanor fought the urge to retreat, but he didn't stop at a proper distance. He came within a few feet, close enough that she could see the weariness in his eyes, the lines that suggested he rarely slept well. "You do not fear speaking your mind to me," he observed. "Should I?" The words escaped before she could stop them. "Forgive me, Your Grace, that was impertinent." It was honest. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the armor he wore so carefully. "Catherine asked me yesterday why I never speak of her mother, my sister. I had no answer for her. How does one explain that speaking of the dead makes their absence more unbearable?" The raw pain in his voice caught Eleanor off guard. This wasn't the cold, powerful Duke that London society feared. This was a man struggling with grief he had no idea how to process. "In my experience, Your Grace, silence doesn't make the pain less. It just makes us feel more alone in carrying it." He studied her for a long moment, and Eleanor forced herself to meet his gaze despite her racing pulse. There was something different in how he looked at her now, not as a servant or a solution to a problem, but as a person who understood. "My sister was the only family I truly had," he said quietly. "Our parents were cold, focused only on duty and lineage. Charlotte was warm and kind, everything they were not. When she married and moved away, I buried myself in managing the estates, in politics, in anything but feeling. And now she's gone, and her daughter looks at me like I'm a stranger. You're not a stranger to Catherine. You're just both grieving differently, in the same house, without knowing how to reach each other." The Duke's jaw tightened. "And you think you can bridge that gap?" "I think," Eleanor said carefully, "that Catherine needs to see you're human, that you loved her mother too, that it's acceptable to feel and to mourn." "Feelings are a luxury I cannot afford, Mrs. Hartley. They make one weak." Eleanor thought of her marriage, of the times she'd been told her emotions were flaws to be suppressed. "No, Your Grace, denying feelings is what makes us weak. Acknowledging them, learning to live with them, that requires real strength." For a heartbeat, something like vulnerability flashed across his face. Then the walls slammed back into place, and he was once again the implacable Duke. "That will be all, Mrs. Hartley. Thank you for your insights." As Eleanor left the study, her hands were still trembling, but for a different reason than when she'd entered. Spring arrived in London, bringing warmer days and the start of the social season. The Duke had engagements nearly every evening, balls, dinners, political gatherings, and Ashford House saw a steady stream of visitors during calling hours. Eleanor and Catherine remained in their separate world, but occasionally their paths crossed with the Duke's society obligations. Lady Pemberton, a striking widow with knowing eyes and obvious designs on the Duke, became a frequent visitor. Eleanor tried to ignore the woman's barbed comments about Catherine's progress and thinly veiled suggestions that a proper governess would have the girl ready for society presentations. "The Duke requires a woman who understands his position," Lady Pemberton remarked one afternoon, her voice carrying to where Eleanor sat with Catherine in the corner of the drawing room. "Someone who can manage his household and represent him properly, not coddle grieving children indefinitely." Eleanor kept her expression neutral, focusing on Catherine's embroidery, but she noticed how the girl's hands stilled, how her shoulders hunched slightly. Later that evening, Catherine was withdrawn and quiet during dinner. The Duke noticed too. After the meal, he requested that Eleanor bring Catherine to the library. When they arrived, they found him seated in one of the leather armchairs, looking less formal than usual, with his cravat loosened. "Catherine," he began gently, "Mrs. Blackwood informed me that you were upset this afternoon. Will you tell me why?" The girl glanced at Eleanor, who gave her an encouraging nod. "Lady Pemberton said I was being coddled, that a proper young lady wouldn't still be sad about Mama." A muscle in the Duke's jaw ticked. "Lady Pemberton is wrong. You are allowed to grieve your mother for as long as you need. No one, including me, will tell you otherwise." Catherine's eyes widened. "Truly? Truly?" He hesitated, then continued with visible effort. "Your mother, my sister, was the best person I have ever known. When we were children, she would sneak into my room during thunderstorms because she knew I was afraid, though I pretended I wasn't. She taught me that admitting fear didn't make me weak." His voice grew softer. "I forgot that lesson somewhere along the way. You've reminded me of it." Tears spilled down Catherine's cheeks, but she was smiling. She ran to her uncle, and after a moment's surprise, he wrapped his arms around her, holding her as she cried. Eleanor felt her own eyes sting watching them. When Catherine finally pulled back, wiping her face, the Duke spoke again. "Mrs. Hartley has been good for both of us, I think. She's helped me remember what Charlotte would have wanted, for us to be a family, not just two people living in the same house." That night, after Catherine was asleep, Eleanor was surprised to find the Duke waiting in the hallway outside her room. "Your Grace," she said, startled. "Is something wrong?" "No. I wanted to thank you properly without my niece present." He paused, seeming to struggle with words. "You have given me back something I thought I'd lost, the ability to connect with what remains of my family. That is a debt I can never truly repay." "You've given me a home and purpose when I had neither," Eleanor replied. "I think we're even, Your Grace." "Alexander," he said quietly. "When we're alone, you may call me Alexander." The intimacy of his given name felt dangerous. Eleanor's pulse quickened, and she recognized the feeling stirring in her chest, attraction, want, things she'd thought her marriage had killed forever. "That wouldn't be proper," she managed. "Very little about our arrangement has been conventional, Eleanor." He used her given name deliberately, watching her reaction. "You're not truly a servant, though you perform duties. You're not family, yet you've become essential to our household. You occupy a space I don't quite know how to define." He stepped closer, and this time Eleanor didn't fight her instinct to retreat until her back met the wall. But he didn't crowd her. He stopped at a respectful distance, though his eyes held an intensity that made breathing difficult. "I frighten you," he observed. Yes, she admitted, but not in the way you think. How then? Eleanor swallowed hard. You make me feel things I swore I'd never feel again. After Thomas, I promised myself I'd never give another man power over me. Alexander's expression softened into something achingly tender. I would never use power that way, but I understand your fear. Trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to rebuild. He stepped back, giving her space. Good night, Eleanor. Sleep well. As he walked away, Eleanor realized she was in terrible danger, not from the Duke's power, but from her own heart's willingness to risk itself again. The turning point came on a rainy May evening. Eleanor was in the library reading by the fire after putting Catherine to bed when Alexander entered looking dishevelled and frustrated. Parliament had been particularly contentious, and the strain showed in every line of his body. "I apologize," he said upon seeing her. "I didn't realize anyone would still be awake. I couldn't sleep." Eleanor marked her page. "Are you all right?" Instead of deflecting, Alexander sank into the chair across from her with a heavy sigh. "No. Tonight, I watch supposedly honorable men vote against measures that would help the poor because it might slightly reduce their own wealth. I argued until my voice was hoarse, and it changed nothing. But you tried. That matters. Does it?" His cynicism was palpable. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm making any difference at all, or just playing an elaborate game that changes nothing for those who truly need help." Eleanor set down her book. "When I first came here, I was terrified of you. You represented everything I'd learned to fear: power, control, the ability to dictate my entire existence. But these past months, I've watched you choose gentleness with Catherine when you could demand obedience. I've seen you listen to my opinions when you could simply command. You've shown me that not all powerful men are tyrants." Alexander looked at her with such raw emotion that it took her breath away. "You've shown me that I don't have to be alone in this life, that letting someone see my doubts and fears doesn't make me weak, it makes me human." He rose and crossed to her chair, kneeling beside it so their eyes were level. "Eleanor, I know I have no right to ask this. You came here to escape debt, not to become entangled with me, but I must be honest. I've fallen in love with you, your strength, your compassion, your refusal to let fear silence your truth. You make me want to be the man Charlotte always believed I could be." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed warnings based on past pain. But looking into Alexander's eyes, she saw nothing of Thomas's control or cruelty. She saw vulnerability, hope, and a love offered freely rather than demanded. "I'm terrified," she whispered. "What if I can't do this? What if the scars from my marriage run too deep?" "Then we'll go slowly. We'll take one day at a time, and you can set every boundary you need. I will never push you beyond what you're comfortable giving." He took her hand gently, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. "But I need you to know, you are not alone in your fear. I'm terrified too. Loving someone means giving them the power to hurt you. It means choosing vulnerability over protection. But with you, Eleanor, I believe that risk is worth taking." Eleanor felt tears slip down her cheeks. "Thomas told me I was weak for crying, for feeling too much." "Thomas was a fool." Alexander's voice was fierce. "Your capacity to feel deeply, to love despite being hurt, that's the strongest thing about you." Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Alexander leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning, nothing like the possessive demands she'd endured in her marriage. It was a promise of partnership, of respect, of tenderness earned rather than assumed. When they parted, Eleanor was trembling, but with hope rather than fear. "I can't promise I won't falter," she said. "There will be moments when old fears resurface. And I can't promise I'll always know the right thing to say or do," Alexander replied. But I promise to listen, to respect your needs, and to love you through both our imperfections." Eleanor took a shaky breath and made her choice. The choice to trust again, to believe that not all love ends in pain, to step forward into an uncertain but hopeful future. "I love you too, Alexander. It terrifies me, but I do." He pulled her close, and she let herself lean into his embrace, feeling safe for the first time in years. In the distance, thunder rumbled, but here in this moment, wrapped in the arms of a man who had proven his gentleness, Eleanor found the courage she'd thought lost forever. Outside, the rain continued to fall on London, washing away the dust of winter and nourishing new growth. Inside Ashford House, two wounded hearts began the slow, precious work of healing together. A duke who had learned to feel again, and a widow who had learned to trust. And upstairs, a young girl slept peacefully, dreaming of a future where love was gentle, families were built on understanding, and happy endings were possible even after the deepest sorrow.